The very eligible young King Cerulean of the Kingdom of Laguna seeks to marry Florine, the daughter of the King of Aulni by his first wife. But his second wife, Queen Repiara, wants him to marry her daughter, Mina. Florine was locked away in a tower. But when Cerulean learned of this, he arranged to speak with her at a window of the tower. But Repiara found out and moved Princess Florine to a different tower and sent Mina to the first tower in her place. So Cerulean, unknowingly, pledged his eternal love to Mina. Dressed in a veil, she met him the following night for a starlit ride in a magical frog-drawn chariot. Now they are heading for the home of Mina's fairy godmother to be married. Mina told Cerulean where her godmother's palace was located, and they flew there in the chariot in haste. It was on the very western edge of Aulni in a large clearing of a forest. At first, Cerulean couldn't see the palace, but Mina pointed it out, about the size of a large doll's house some distance away. Moments later, the palace grew in size, large enough for human visitors. But Mina asked Cerulean to wait outside, while she went inside to speak with her godmother. Cerulean, of course, agreed, and sat on an old tree stump. Inside, Mina was greeted by Susi, her godmother. She told the fairy how her and her mother's ruse had been successful, and King Cerulean had proposed to her. She begged the fairy to use her magic to soothe him when he discovered the truth.
"My child," replied her godmother, "that is more easily said than done. He is too deeply in love with Florine."
The king was still waiting on the tree stump outside when one of Susi's servants came out to invite him into the main hall of the palace. In an inversion of the usual wedding proceedings, he saw the veiled Mina standing by the fairy waiting for her groom. Servants of Susi played music as the king walked along the room to them. When he got there, he tenderly touched Mina's veiled head. Then, Mina was too spellbound by romantic feelings to stop him from lifting the veil. When he saw that he had been tricked, he cried, "Princess Mina, it was you?" She nodded nervously. Then the fairy sorceress spoke in an enchanted voice.
"King Cerulean of Laguna, you pledged to her your eternal fidelity, did you not? And asked for her hand?"
"To her ears, perhaps, but keenly aimed at Princess Florine's heart, I assure you," replied Cerulean. Mina winced for a moment, then said, pleadingly, "You promised me, and I accepted, my love." Cerulean cringed at this, but became silent. All three of them, Susi, Mina, and Cerulean, knew that the young king struggled with his sense of honour against the passion of his heart. Thinking of Florine, his eyes blazed, and finally he said, "I cannot love nor marry you, Mina. Do you really wish for such a husband?" Tears formed around the princess's eyes. Of course, such a marriage would be painful. But the notion of him rejecting her for Florine seemed far worse. Before she could answer, Cerulean bowed to Mina and her godmother. "I am sorry, Princess Mina, good fairy, but I must take my leave." But before he could walk away, Susi darted forward and touched him, and he found his feet stuck to the floor. "Turn me to stone if you must," said Cerulean. "But I assure you my stone heart will love Florine all the same."
"My dear young king," said the fairy, "understand well. You shall remain like this until you honour your word to my goddaughter."
And so for 20 days and 20 nights he stood there, not sleeping or eating, while each day Susi employed persuasions, threats, promises, and entreaties. Mina looked on all the while, sometimes weeping, sometimes groaning or screaming, before eventually settling into a prolonged sulk. But Cerulean said nothing, his eyes blazing and heart full of Florine. After all this time, Susi was growing tired of the sight of her new statue and said,
"My dear young king, I'll make you one final offer. You have two choices. The first, as you may no doubt assume, is to marry my goddaughter. The second is to suffer a punishment of my choosing."
Bold with youth, good breeding, and love, he spoke his first words in 20 days. "The second." Susi's eyes flashed.
"Then fly out of this window in the shape of a blue bird."
In that moment, he began to transform. His arms formed into wings, his legs and feet turned black and thin, and claws grew upon them. His body shrank into the slender shape of a bird, covered with bright blue feathers, what had been the colour of his eyes, which then turned near black blue and beady. His nose into an ivory beak, and his head was crowned with a white plume. He chirped bitterly, then flew straight out the nearest window. Fortunately, perhaps, though his body was that of a bird, he retained the mind of a human, and his memories, and he did not stop lamenting for his beautiful Florine. Flying from tree to tree, he sang melancholy songs about her and himself. During the time Cerulean had been frozen to the floor of the palace, Susi had spotted the winged frogs, and promptly caught them and handed them over to her chef to cook in a classic Alni recipe. As such, after Cerulean the bird's departure, another means of returning to the castle needed to be provided for Princess Mina. Susi had her own stable of enchanted cart animals, and picked out some strong-winged doves. They were about 3 times the size of a common dove. She got one of her fairy servants to fly Mina home. Before long, the dove-drawn cart landed in the courtyard of Alni Palace. Mina found her mother in her private chamber, and reported what had happened. Repiara smiled wickedly, then called a servant, and asked them to free Florine from the tower, and bring her to her. When Florine arrived, the queen pointed out the ring on Mina's finger, and told her that Cerulean had chosen her sister to marry. The shock of hearing this was so much that Florine fainted. Repiara told King Hanier that his daughter ought to be monitored in case she did something to disgrace herself, because she was mad for the love of her sister's fiancé. The king, as ever, assented to this suggestion from his enchanting wife.